Subscribe now. New Royal Guard stories exposing shocking moments inside the royal family. The morning of March 15th started like any other day at Kensington Palace. The sun barely peeked through the heavy curtains of the East Wing, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Prince Louis, the youngest child of Prince William and Princess Catherine, had been looking forward to this particular morning for weeks. His room was scheduled for a special renovation, a surprise gift from his parents to celebrate his recent birthday. The 5-year-old prince had sketched drawings of what he wanted. Rockets and planets painted on his ceiling, a reading nook by the window, and shelves for his growing collection of toy soldiers. Sarah Mitchell had been working as a housekeeping supervisor at Kensington Palace for nearly 12 years. She knew every corner of the residence, every routine, and every member of the household staff. That morning, she arrived earlier than usual because the renovation team was expected to take measurements and finalize plans for Prince Louis's room. Sarah carried her clipboard and her ring of keys, ready to coordinate the day's activities. She had always taken pride in her work, ensuring that every detail met the highest standards expected in a royal household. As Sarah walked through the corridors toward the family wing, she noticed something unusual. The door to Prince Louis's room stood slightly ajar, which was strange because the family had left for an engagement in Scotland the previous evening. The room should have been locked and secured. Sarah slowed her pace, her instincts telling her something was not quite right. She approached quietly, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the polished floor. Through the narrow opening, Sarah could see movement inside the room. Someone was there, moving deliberately among the prince's belongings. Sarah's heart began to race. Security protocols were strict, and no one should have been in that room without proper authorization and supervision. She carefully pushed the door open just enough to see inside without being noticed. What Sarah saw made her freeze in place. Queen Camilla stood in the center of Prince Louis's room, her back to the door. She was not simply looking around or admiring the space. Camilla held several of the young prince's drawings in her hands, the very sketches he had made for his room renovation. Sarah watched as Camilla examined each drawing carefully, then placed them face down on the desk. From her handbag, Camilla retrieved what appeared to be different drawings, ones that Louis had clearly not created. The style was different, the handwriting more mature, and the designs completely unlike anything the young prince would have imagined. Sarah's mind raced. She knew she should announce her presence, but something stopped her. Years of working in the palace had taught her that royal family matters were delicate and complex. She remained still, barely breathing, watching through the narrow gap as Camilla continued her work. The queen consort moved with purpose, replacing each of Louis's original drawings with the new ones. She arranged them carefully on the desk and pinned several to the bulletin board on the wall, making them look as though they had always been there. Camilla then opened the closet where the renovation team's preliminary plans had been stored. Sarah had placed them there herself just 2 days earlier, clearly labeled and organized. Camilla pulled out the folder containing the plans and began making marks on the documents with a pen. She crossed out specifications, added notes in the margins, and completely altered the design elements that Prince William and Princess Catherine had approved. The rockets and planets Louis wanted were marked through. The reading nook was relocated to a less desirable corner. Even the color palette was changed from the bright blues and silvers Louis loved to muted grays and darker tones. Sarah felt her hands trembling. She was witnessing something that could create serious problems within the royal family. She knew that Prince William and Catherine had spent considerable time with Louis, encouraging him to express his preferences for his own space. They had been proud of how creative and specific their youngest son had been about what he wanted. Now, all of his input was being systematically replaced. Just as Sarah was trying to decide what to do, she heard footsteps approaching from the other end of the corridor. James Peterson, one of the senior security officers, was making his rounds. Sarah knew James well. He was thorough, discreet, and fiercely protective of the younger royals. She stepped back from the door, her heart pounding, and quickly moved to intercept him before he could walk past. James looked surprised to see Sarah standing in the hallway, her face pale and her expression tense. She raised a finger to her lips and gestured for him to follow her away from the door. They moved quickly and quietly to a small alcove 20 feet down the corridor. Sarah spoke in an urgent whisper, explaining what she had just witnessed. James's expression shifted from confusion to concern as he listened. Together, they returned to Prince Louis's room. James positioned himself where he could see inside without being obvious. By this time, Camilla had finished with the renovation plans and was now going through the prince's toy chest. She removed several items, including a stuffed lion that had been a gift from Prince Harry, and a set of building blocks that Princess Catherine's parents had given Louis. These items were placed in a canvas bag that Camilla had brought with her. In their place, she arranged different toys, ones that looked new and unused, still bearing faint price tags that she quickly removed. James pulled out his phone and began recording video. His hands were steady despite the unusual situation. In the palace, everything could become a matter of dispute, and evidence was essential. He captured clear footage of Camilla replacing Louis's belongings, altering the renovation documents, and switching the drawings. Sarah stood beside him, serving as a second witness to everything they were seeing. After nearly 20 minutes, Camilla seemed satisfied with her work. She stepped back, surveyed the room one final time, and gathered her belongings. She tucked the canvas bag containing Louis's original items under her arm, smoothed her skirt, and walked toward the door. Sarah and James had already moved back to their alcove, hidden from view. They watched as Camilla exited the room, locked the door with a key she produced from her pocket, and walked briskly down the corridor in the opposite direction. Neither Sarah nor James spoke for a long moment after Camilla disappeared from view. The implications of what they had witnessed were enormous. This was not a simple case of misplaced items or innocent rearranging. This was deliberate tampering with a child's personal space and the systematic removal of his choices and preferences from a project that was meant to be his own. James finally broke the silence. He told Sarah that they needed to document everything immediately while the details were fresh. They needed to write down exactly what they had seen, what time it occurred, and the specific actions Camilla had taken. They also needed to secure the video footage and ensure it was backed up properly. But most importantly, they needed to decide how to report this incident. The challenge they faced was significant. Camilla was the queen consort, the wife of King Charles. Going to her with concerns was obviously not an option. But Prince William and Princess Catherine were in Scotland and would not return until the following evening. The renovation team was scheduled to arrive in just a few hours to begin work based on the altered plans. If Sarah and James did nothing, Prince Louis's room would be renovated according to specifications he had never approved. Using designs he had never created, Sarah suggested they contact the private secretary to the Prince and Princess of Wales. This individual served as the primary point of communication for all matters concerning William and Catherine's household. It was the appropriate channel for reporting something this sensitive. James agreed. He checked his watch. It was now 7:30 in the morning. The private secretary, Michael Thornton, would likely be at his desk within the hour. As they waited, Sarah and James returned to Prince Louis's room. Using her master key, Sarah opened the door and they entered to document the scene more thoroughly. James took photographs of the replaced drawings, noting how different they were from Louis's original style. Sarah photographed the altered renovation plans, capturing the crossed-out elements and the changed specifications. They also documented the new toys in the toy chest, noting the missing items they had seen Camilla remove. What struck them both was how thorough the changes had been. This was not a spur-of-a-moment decision. Camilla had brought replacement drawings with her already prepared. She had brought new toys to substitute for the ones she removed. She had brought the tools necessary to alter the renovation plans. This had been planned in advance, which made the situation even more troubling. At 8:15, James called Michael Thornton's office. The private secretary answered immediately, his voice professional and calm. James explained that there was an urgent matter requiring immediate attention regarding Prince Louis. He requested a private meeting as soon as possible. Michael, sensing the gravity in James's tone, asked them to come to his office right away. Sarah and James walked through the palace to the administrative wing, where Michael maintained his office. The corridors were beginning to fill with staff members starting their day. But no one paid particular attention to the two of them. They knocked on Michael's door and were quickly ushered inside. The office was elegant but functional. With photographs of the Prince and Princess of Wales with their children displayed on the credenza, Michael Thornton was a man in his late 50s, with silver hair and sharp, observant eyes. He had served the royal family for over 20 years and had earned a reputation for handling sensitive matters with discretion and wisdom. He gestured for Sarah and James to sit and closed the door firmly behind them. James began by showing Michael the video footage on his phone. They watched in silence as Camilla moved through Prince Louis's room, placing drawings, altering plans, and removing personal items. Sarah provided additional context, explaining the timeline and the specific details of what they had witnessed. She showed Michael the photographs they had taken afterward, pointing out the discrepancies between what Louis had requested and what now appeared in the room. Michael's expression remained neutral throughout the presentation, but his eyes betrayed his concern. When they finished, he sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice measured and serious. This was, he said, an extremely delicate situation. The actions they had witnessed could not be ignored, but the response needed to be carefully considered. Any misstep could create a serious rift within the royal family at a time. When unity was essential for the institution's public image, Michael asked several clarifying questions. Was Sarah certain that Prince Louis had created the original drawings that were replaced? Sarah confirmed that she had personally watched Louis working on them in the family's drawing room just 10 days earlier. Princess Catherine had been with him, encouraging him and praising his creativity. Had James's video captured clear images of Camilla's face and actions? James replayed portions of the video, showing that Camilla was unmistakably identifiable and that her actions were deliberate and purposeful. Michael made a decision. He would contact Prince William immediately, despite the early hour and the fact that the prince was in Scotland. This matter could not wait for his scheduled return. Michael picked up his secure phone line and placed the call. After a brief conversation with William's personal protection officer, the prince came on the line. The conversation lasted nearly 15 minutes. Michael explained the situation clearly and factually, avoiding any emotional language or speculation about motives. He described what Sarah and James had witnessed, confirmed that video evidence existed, and outlined the immediate problem with the renovation team's pending arrival. Prince William's response was swift and decisive. Michael was to halt all work on Louis's room immediately. The renovation team was to be sent away with a polite explanation that the timeline had changed. William would cut his Scotland trip short and return to London that afternoon with Catherine. They would address the situation directly upon their return. After ending the call, Michael turned his attention to the practical matters at hand. He contacted the renovation company and explained that due to unforeseen circumstances, the project needed to be postponed for at least a week. The company was understanding, though clearly disappointed. They had allocated their team specifically for this project, but they agreed to reschedule. Michael assured them they would still receive compensation for the day's planned work. Next came the more difficult task. Michael needed to ensure that the evidence Sarah and James had gathered was properly secured. He asked James to transfer the video footage to the palace's secure server, accessible only to the Prince and Princess of Wales and their most senior staff. The photographs Sarah had taken were similarly uploaded and protected. Michael also asked both of them to write detailed statements describing everything they had seen, including the exact time, their locations, and the sequence of events. These statements would be crucial if the matter escalated. Sarah wrote her statement carefully, describing not just what she had seen but also what she knew about Prince Louis's original plans for his room. She included details about the afternoon she had watched the young prince working on his drawings, his excitement about the rockets and planets, and his pride in choosing his own color scheme. She wanted to make clear that this was not simply about room decorations. It was about a child's autonomy and his parents' efforts to encourage his independence and creativity. James's statement was more technical, but equally detailed. He noted the timestamps on his video, specific alterations he had observed Camilla making to the renovation plans, and the items he had seen her remove from the room. He also documented the key Camilla had used to lock the door, noting that this key should have been secured in the household key cabinet and should not have been in her personal possession. By noon, everything was documented and secured. The renovation team had been sent away. Prince Louis's room was locked again, this time with a temporary lock that only Michael, Sarah, and James had keys to open. They had done everything they could to preserve the situation until Prince William and Princess Catherine could return and address it themselves. Sarah returned to her regular duties, though her mind remained troubled by what she had witnessed. She had worked in royal households long enough to understand that family dynamics could be complicated. But this felt different. This felt like a deliberate attempt to undermine Prince William and Catherine's parenting choices, to override a young child's preferences without any consultation or discussion. Sarah could not understand what would motivate such behavior. James continued his security rounds, but he found himself thinking about the broader implications. In his years of protecting the royal family, he had seen disagreements and tensions, but they were usually handled through proper channels, with conversations and negotiations. What he had witnessed that morning was something else entirely, something that felt secretive and dishonest. It troubled him deeply. Prince William and Princess Catherine arrived back at Kensington Palace at 4 o'clock that afternoon. They came directly from the airport, still wearing the casual clothes they had traveled in. Michael Thornton was waiting for them in the private family sitting room. He had prepared a complete briefing package, including the video footage, photographs, and written statements from Sarah and James. William and Catherine sat together on the sofa as Michael played the video. Catherine's hand went to her mouth as she watched Camilla going through Louis's belongings. William's jaw tightened and his face grew increasingly stern as the video continued. When it ended, they sat in silence for a moment, processing what they had just seen. Catherine was the first to speak. Her voice was quiet, but filled with emotion. She explained that Louis had been so proud of his drawings. He had worked on them for days, erasing and redrawing until he got them exactly right. He had talked about his room renovation constantly, telling his siblings George and Charlotte about every detail he had planned. The idea that someone would simply discard all of that work as if it meant nothing was deeply hurtful. William's response was more measured, but no less concerned. He wanted to understand the full scope of what had happened. He asked Michael to arrange for Sarah and James to join them so he could hear their accounts directly. Within 20 minutes, both staff members were in the sitting room, recounting their experiences in person. Sarah described the moment she had first seen the door ajar and the shock of realizing who was inside the room. She explained her decision to observe rather than interrupt, and her relief when James had arrived so she would have a second witness. She also shared her emotional reaction, explaining that she had watched Prince Louis's enthusiasm for this project and felt heartbroken to see his work so casually dismissed. James provided the security perspective. He explained the protocols around room access, the significance of Camilla having a key she should not have possessed, and his decision to record video evidence. He also noted that in his professional opinion, this had been a planned action, not a spontaneous decision. The preparation involved suggested that Camilla had thought about this and had come equipped to make specific changes. When they finished speaking, Prince William thanked them both for their professionalism and their dedication to his son's well-being. He assured them that they had done exactly the right thing by documenting what they had seen and reporting it through proper channels. He also asked them to maintain absolute discretion about the matter. They understood immediately and gave their word that they would not discuss this with anyone. After Sarah and James left, William and Catherine faced a difficult decision. They needed to confront Camilla about what she had done, but they needed to do so in a way that would not create a permanent rupture in the family. King Charles needed to be informed, but they were uncertain how he would react. He was known to be protective of Camilla, sometimes to the point of overlooking concerning behavior. Catherine suggested they start by going to Louis's room to see the current state of things with their own eyes. They walked together to the family wing, and Michael unlocked the temporary lock on the door. As they entered, both of them were struck by how different the room felt. The drawings pinned to the bulletin board were neat and formal, completely unlike their son's enthusiastic, messy sketches. The toys in the chest were organized almost clinically, missing the personal items that Louis treasured. William picked up one of the fake drawings, examining it closely. The handwriting was too perfect, the lines too straight. Louis was a bright child, but he was still only 5 years old. His drawings had character and personality. These replacements were sterile and impersonal. William set the drawing down and turned to Catherine, his expression serious. They spent nearly an hour in the room, going through everything that had been changed. Catherine opened the folder containing the renovation plans and saw all the alterations Camilla had made. Every preference Louis had expressed was either modified or completely removed. The bold, imaginative room he had envisioned was replaced with something bland and conventional. It's more suited to Camilla's traditional tastes than to a young boy's creativity. As they stood in their son's room, Catherine made an observation that struck William deeply. She said this was not just about room decoration or design preferences. This was about control. Someone had taken it upon themselves to override the decisions of parents regarding their own child, to substitute their judgment for that of William and Catherine without any discussion or permission. If this could happen with something as seemingly minor as a room renovation, what else might Camilla feel entitled to control or change? William nodded slowly. He recognized the truth in Catherine's words. This incident, while focusing on something relatively small in the grand scheme of things, revealed a deeper issue about boundaries and respect within the family structure. He and Catherine had worked hard to raise their children, with a balance of royal responsibility and normal childhood experiences. They encouraged their children to have opinions, make choices, and develop their own personalities. Now someone had decided that Louis's choices were not acceptable. That evening, William placed a call to Clarence's house, requesting a private meeting with his father and Camilla for the following morning. King Charles's private secretary initially tried to deflect, suggesting that Charles and Camilla's schedule was quite full. William was polite but firm. This was a family matter of significant importance, and it could not wait. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock the next morning at Clarence's house. William and Catherine spent the rest of the evening preparing for the conversation. They reviewed the evidence again, discussed their concerns, and tried to anticipate how the meeting might unfold. They both agreed that they needed to be calm and factual, presenting what had happened without making accusations about motives. They also agreed that they needed to be firm about boundaries and expectations going forward. Meanwhile, at Clarence's house, King Charles had been informed by his secretary that William had requested an urgent meeting and had insisted on Camilla's presence. Charles found this unusual. William typically handled family matters through casual conversations, not formal meetings. The fact that he had specifically requested both of them suggested something serious had occurred. Camilla, when informed of the meeting, appeared unconcerned. She mentioned casually that it was probably about the children's schedules or some minor protocol matter. She did not seem worried, which suggested to Charles that she had no idea what the meeting would actually address. The morning of the meeting arrived with typical London gray skies. William and Catherine drove together to Clarence's house, arriving exactly at 10 o'clock. They were shown immediately to Charles's private study, a comfortable room lined with books and family photographs. Charles stood when they entered, embracing his son and daughter-in-law warmly. Camilla was already seated in one of the leather chairs, a cup of tea balanced on her knee. She smiled pleasantly at them, still showing no signs of concern. After the initial greetings, Charles invited them to sit. He had a pot of fresh tea brought in, and there was a moment of polite conversation about the Scotland trip and the weather. But William did not let the small talk continue for long. He looked directly at his father and said they needed to discuss something serious that had occurred regarding Prince Louis. Charles's expression shifted to concern immediately. He asked if Louis was all right, if something had happened to him. Catherine quickly assured him that Louis was fine physically. The issue was not about his health or safety. It was about an incident that had taken place in his room at Kensington Palace. William then produced a tablet and opened the video file that James had recorded. He explained briefly what they were about to watch: security footage from Prince Louis's room, captured by palace security staff. He pressed play and turned the tablet so that both Charles and Camilla could see the screen clearly. The color drained from Camilla's face. Within the first few seconds of the video, she set her teacup down with a slight tremor in her hand. Charles leaned forward, his brow furrowing as he watched the footage. No one spoke as the video played. The room was silent except for the soft sounds from the tablet, captured voices and movement from the recording. When the video ended, the silence continued for several long seconds. Charles looked at Camilla, confusion and disappointment evident in his expression. Camilla opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. She looked down at her hands, and for the first time since William and Catherine had arrived, she appeared genuinely uncomfortable. William spoke first, his voice steady and calm despite the tension in the room. He explained that two trusted members of their household staff had witnessed what the video showed. They had documented the incident thoroughly because it represented a serious breach of boundaries within the family. He then showed Charles the photographs of the replaced drawings, the altered renovation plans, and the changed contents of Louis's toy chest. Catherine added her perspective, describing Louis's excitement about his room renovation and his pride in creating the designs himself. She explained that she and William had deliberately given Louis significant input into the project because they wanted him to learn to make decisions and express his preferences. They believed this was important for his development, helping him understand that his opinions mattered and that he had some control over his own environment. Charles finally found his voice. He turned to Camilla and asked directly what had possessed her to do such a thing. His tone was not angry but bewildered, as if he genuinely could not understand the reasoning behind her actions. Camilla remained silent for a moment longer before beginning to speak. Her explanation started with justifications. She said she had been trying to help. She claimed that she had looked at Louis's original drawings and felt they were too chaotic, too overwhelming for a young child's room. She thought the renovation plans were too ambitious and would result in a space that was too stimulating, potentially affecting Louis's ability to rest and concentrate. She said she had meant well, that she was trying to create a more suitable environment for him. William listened to this explanation with growing frustration. He pointed out that no one had asked for Camilla's help or input. He and Catherine were Louis's parents. They were fully capable of deciding what was appropriate for their son's room. If Camilla had concerns, the proper approach would have been to raise them in a conversation, not to secretly alter everything without their knowledge or consent. Catherine added that the issue was not just about the room itself. The issue was about the violation of trust and the complete disregard for their authority as parents. She asked Camilla how she would have felt if someone had done something similar with William or Harry when they were children. If someone had overridden her decisions about their upbringing without even consulting her. Camilla's expression hardened slightly at this comparison. She said the situations were not equivalent. She had been a stepmother, coming into an established family structure. Catherine was married to the future king and was raising the future heir to the throne. Camilla suggested that perhaps she had some valuable perspective to offer. Given her years of experience in royal life, this response clearly struck a nerve with William. His voice took on a sharper edge. He said that being queen consort did not give Camilla the right to interfere in how he and Catherine raised their children. George, Charlotte, and Louis were their responsibility, and parenting decisions were theirs to make. He acknowledged that Camilla had experience in royal life, but that did not translate to authority over his children or their household. Charles, who had been listening to this exchange with visible discomfort, finally intervened. He said they needed to step back and approach this more calmly. He acknowledged that Camilla had made a serious error in judgment. He looked at her and said clearly that what she had done was inappropriate and should not have happened. However, he also suggested that they could resolve this within the family, without allowing it to escalate further. William was not satisfied with this response. He said this was not simply an error in judgment or a minor family disagreement. This was a deliberate action that required planning and preparation. Camilla had brought replacement drawings with her. She had brought new toys. She had obtained a key to Louise's room that she should not have had access to. This was calculated interference, and it raised serious questions about boundaries and respect. Catherine supported her husband's position. She said they needed more than just an acknowledgement that this was inappropriate. They needed to understand why it had happened and have assurance that nothing like this would happen again. She emphasized that their children's well-being and their own authority as parents had to be respected absolutely. Camilla finally spoke again, and this time her tone was defensive. She said she had only wanted to help create a proper environment for a young royal prince. She felt that William and Catherine were perhaps too lenient, allowing Louis too much freedom in decisions he was too young to make wisely. She believed that royal children needed structure and traditional guidance, not the modern parenting approaches that William and Catherine favored. The room fell silent after this statement. William and Catherine exchanged glances, both recognizing that Camilla had just revealed the real issue. This was not about room decoration or design preferences. This was about fundamentally different views on how royal children should be raised. It was about Camilla disagreeing with their parenting philosophy and deciding to impose her own views without permission or discussion. William addressed this directly. He said he and Catherine had given considerable thought to how they wanted to raise their children. They wanted George, Charlotte, and Louis to have as normal a childhood as possible while still preparing them for their future roles. They wanted their children to be confident, creative, and independent thinkers. If Camilla disagreed with this approach, that was her right, but it gave her no authority to undermine their decisions. Charles looked increasingly distressed as the conversation continued. He was caught between his wife and his son, between two people he loved who were now in serious conflict. He tried again to find middle ground, suggesting that perhaps they could establish clearer communication going forward, that Camilla could raise concerns before taking any actions. But William was not willing to accept this as a sufficient solution. He said the problem was not a lack of communication. The problem was that Camilla had felt entitled to take these actions in the first place. He needed to know that she understood she had crossed a serious line, and that she would respect their boundaries as parents going forward. Catherine added that they needed to think about what message this incident sent to their children. If Louis ever learned that someone had secretly changed all of his careful plans for his room, how would that affect him? Would he learn that his choices did not matter? Would he become reluctant to express preferences, knowing they might be overridden? These were real consequences that extended beyond the immediate family disagreement. Camilla shifted in her chair, her discomfort evident. She said she had not thought about it from that perspective. She had genuinely believed she was being helpful, improving on ideas that she saw as unsuitable. She had not considered how it might affect Louis emotionally, or what it might teach him about whether his opinions were valued. This admission seemed to be the first genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing that Camilla had offered. William recognized it as such and softened his tone slightly. He said he appreciated that Camilla might not have intended harm, but intentions did not erase the impact of actions. The fact remained that she had violated their trust and undermined their parenting in a significant way. Charles seized on this slight softening to press for resolution. He asked what William and Catherine needed to move forward from this incident. He emphasized that they were family and needed to find a way to work through this together. He acknowledged again that Camilla had been wrong, but he also appealed to William's sense of family unity and the importance of presenting a strong, united royal family to the public. William and Catherine took a moment to confer quietly with each other. Then William laid out their expectations clearly. First, Louis's room would be renovated exactly according to his original plans, using his real drawings and specifications. The items Camilla had removed needed to be returned immediately. Second, they needed Camilla's explicit agreement that she would never again take any action regarding their children without first discussing it with them. Third, they needed this agreement to extend to all aspects of their children's lives, including education, activities, schedules, and public appearances. Camilla listened to these conditions, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded and said she agreed to all of them. She apologized directly to William and Catherine, saying she recognized that she had overstepped and that it would not happen again. She also said she would return the items she had taken from Louis's room that very day. Catherine had one additional requirement. She wanted Camilla to write a letter to Louis, explaining in child-appropriate language that his original drawings were wonderful, and that his room would be decorated exactly as he had wanted. She did not need to explain what she had done, as Louis was not yet aware of the incident, but Catherine wanted something positive and affirming for their son, acknowledging the value of his creative work. Camilla agreed to this as well, though she looked somewhat pained by the request. Charles expressed relief that they had reached an agreement. He thanked William and Catherine for bringing the matter to him directly rather than allowing it to fester or become a public issue. He promised that he would speak with Camilla privately to ensure she fully understood the seriousness of what had happened. As the meeting concluded, the atmosphere remained strained, but slightly less tense than it had been. William and Catherine stood to leave, and Charles embraced them both again, holding William perhaps a moment longer than usual. There was an unspoken plea in that embrace, father asking his son not to let this incident destroy the fragile family harmony they had built. Later that afternoon, a member of Camilla's staff arrived at Kensington Palace carrying a canvas bag. Inside were all the items that had been removed from Prince Louis's room, including his stuffed lion and the building blocks from his maternal grandparents. Sarah Mitchell received the items and carefully returned them to their proper places in Louis's toy chest. She also retrieved the prince's original drawings from the safe where Michael Thornton had stored them for protection. They went back on the bulletin board, their childish enthusiasm and creative energy once again visible in the room. The renovation company was contacted again and asked to return to their original timeline. Michael Thornton personally met with the project manager to ensure that Louis's authentic plans would be followed precisely. He showed them the young prince's drawings and explained that these represented exactly what the family wanted. The project manager was charmed by Louis's sketches, promised that his team would bring the vision to life perfectly. 3 days later, a cream-colored envelope arrived for Prince Louis, bearing the royal cipher of the Queen Consort. Inside was a letter written in Camilla's careful handwriting. The letter praised Louis's creativity and artistic talent. It told him that his drawings for his room were absolutely splendid, full of imagination and joy. It said that his room would be a wonderful place where he could dream of exploring space and having adventures. The letter was warm and encouraging, exactly what Catherine had requested. Catherine read the letter aloud to Louis that evening before bed. The young prince beamed with pride, delighted that his grandmother had noticed his work and thought it was special. He asked if he could write a thank you note back. Catherine helped him compose a simple message expressing his excitement about his room renovation. In that moment, Louis remained innocent of the full story behind the letter, protected by his parents' decision to shield him from the adult conflicts and complications. The renovation work began the following week. True to their word, the project team followed Louis's plans exactly. They painted planets and stars on his ceiling, creating a nighttime sky that glowed softly in the dark. They built the reading nook by the window where he had wanted it, with cushions in his chosen shade of bright blue. They installed shelves for his toy soldiers and created a display area for his drawings and school projects. When the work was completed, the room was exactly what Louis had envisioned, a perfect reflection of his personality and interests. The day the room was finished, William and Catherine brought all 3 children to see it. George and Charlotte were impressed by their brother's space-themed sanctuary. Louis was overwhelmed with joy, running from one feature to another, touching everything and talking excitedly about which toys would go where and how he would arrange his books. William and Catherine watched him, feeling vindicated in their decision to let him make his own choices about his space. This was worth protecting. In the weeks that followed, the relationship between William and Catherine and Camilla remained cordial but noticeably cooler. Family gatherings continued as scheduled, and everyone maintained appropriate appearances for the sake of unity and discretion. But there was an underlying tension that had not existed before, a wariness that colored their interactions. Sarah Mitchell and James Peterson continued their work at Kensington Palace, their professionalism and discretion having earned them even deeper trust from the Prince and Princess of Wales. They never spoke of the incident outside of formal reporting channels. Their experience had taught them that protecting the royal family sometimes meant protecting them from each other. King Charles, true to his word, had a serious private conversation with Camilla after the meeting with William and Catherine. He made clear that her actions had created a genuine crisis of trust within the family. He told her that whatever disagreements she might have with how William and Catherine raised their children, she had to respect their authority and their decisions. Her role was to support, not to interfere. Camilla accepted his words, but privately she struggled with the restrictions being placed on her involvement with her step-grandchildren. Michael Thornton updated the protocols for household staff regarding access to the family's private rooms. Additional security measures were implemented, and the key cabinet system was reviewed and strengthened. While these changes were never explicitly attributed to the incident with Camilla, Those who knew the real story understood that they were direct consequences of what had happened. Catherine made a point of spending extra time with Louis in his newly renovated room. She would sit with him during his quiet time, reading stories or watching him play. She wanted to reinforce for him that his choices mattered, that his creativity was valued, and that his parents trusted his judgment. She never told him what had almost happened, but she made sure he knew how proud they were of the room he had designed. William, for his part, began to think more carefully about boundaries within the extended royal family. This incident had revealed vulnerabilities in their family structure that he had not fully recognized before. It had shown him that even people who loved his children might have different ideas about what was best for them. Ideas that could lead to actions that undermined his and Catherine's parenting. He realized that as his children grew older and the stakes became higher, these boundary issues might become even more complicated. One evening, several weeks after the incident, William and Catherine were in their own sitting room after the children had gone to bed. They were reviewing plans for an upcoming royal tour when Catherine set down the documents and looked at her husband thoughtfully. She said she had been thinking about what had happened with Louis's room and what it represented. William looked up, recognizing that this was going to be a serious conversation. Catherine explained that she understood Camilla's perspective in some ways. Even if she completely disagreed with her actions, Camilla had spent years adapting to royal life, learning its protocols and traditions. She had developed strong opinions about how things should be done. But the royal family was changing, evolving to meet the needs of a new generation. William and Catherine were raising their children in a different way than previous generations had, and not everyone would understand or approve of their methods. William agreed, adding that they needed to be prepared for more conflicts like this in the future. As George grew closer to eventually assuming his royal responsibilities, as Charlotte and Louis developed their own roles within the family, there would be many opinions about how they should be educated, what activities they should pursue, how much normal life they should experience. He and Catherine would need to stand firm in their convictions and protect their children's well-being, even when it meant disappointing or conflicting with other family members. They made a pact that evening. They would always present a united front when it came to their children. They would listen to advice and input from family members, but the final decisions would always be theirs alone. They would prioritize their children's emotional health and individual development over tradition or protocol when necessary, and they would not allow guilt or pressure to make them compromise on what they believed was right for George, Charlotte, and Louis. As spring turned to summer, life at Kensington Palace settled into a new normal. The incident with Louis's room became a defining moment that had clarified boundaries and expectations within the family. It had been painful and uncomfortable, but it had also been necessary. Trust, once broken, was slowly being rebuilt through consistent respect for the agreements that had been reached. Prince Louis thrived in his new room. He spent hours playing there, his imagination soaring among the planets and stars on his ceiling. He never knew how close he had come to having a completely different space, one that would have reflected someone else's vision rather than his own. His innocence was preserved, and his confidence in his own creativity remained intact. Sarah Mitchell watched the young prince playing in his room one afternoon when she was checking on the cleaning staff. She smiled, knowing that she and James had played a crucial role in protecting this child's happiness. It had been uncomfortable to witness what Camilla had done, and even more uncomfortable to report it. But seeing Louis so joyful in his space confirmed that they had done the right thing. James Peterson, during his security rounds, would occasionally pause at Prince Louis's door and remember that morning when he had recorded the video that changed everything. He thought about how different things might have been if he and Sarah had not been there, if no one had witnessed what happened. Louis would have gotten a room that was not really his, and no one would have known why it felt wrong. The story of what happened in Prince Louis's room remained a closely guarded secret. Known only to a handful of people who had been directly involved, the public never learned about the incident, and the royal family presented its usual image of unity and cooperation. But behind the scenes, everyone who knew the truth carried the knowledge that family dynamics were complex and that protecting children sometimes meant standing up to powerful people. For William and Catherine, the incident reinforced their commitment to their parenting philosophy. They would continue to encourage their children to be independent thinkers, to have opinions and make choices. They would continue to value creativity and individuality, even when it conflicted with traditional expectations. And they would continue to fight for their children's right to be themselves, whatever that might mean for the future of the monarchy. Camilla, for her part, seemed to have learned from the experience. She was more careful in her interactions with William and Catherine's children, more respectful of boundaries. She still had her opinions about how royal children should be raised, but she kept them to herself, or shared them only in appropriate ways. The letter she had written to Louis was not just a requirement that had been imposed on her. It had been an opportunity for her to see through a child's eyes, to recognize that what seemed chaotic and overwhelming to her was actually joyful and exciting to him. King Charles remained caught in the middle, loving both his son and his wife, wanting peace and harmony in his family. He worked quietly to maintain balance, having private conversations when tensions rose, mediating when necessary. The incident with Louis's room had shown him that his family was more fragile than he had wanted to believe, and he took his role as peacekeeper seriously. As autumn approached, Prince Louis's room remained exactly as he had designed it. The paint on the walls was bright and cheerful. The planets on the ceiling continued to glow softly at night. The reading nook by the window was his favorite place to sit and look out at the palace gardens. Every element of the room told the story of a child who had been allowed to express himself, protected by parents who valued his individuality above all else. The staff at Kensington Palace went about their duties with the usual efficiency and discretion. Sarah Mitchell and James Peterson had been quietly commended for their handling of the situation. Their professionalism recognized and appreciated, they continued to serve the family faithfully, knowing that sometimes the most important part of their job was protecting the family members from threats that came from within rather than from outside. The incident became a turning point for the family, a moment when choices had to be made about respect, boundaries, and authority. It tested relationships and forced difficult conversations, but it also clarified expectations and strengthened resolve. William and Catherine emerged from the experience even more committed to their children and their vision for their family's future. In the end, Prince Louis's room stood as a symbol of something larger than interior decoration. It represented a child's right to have a voice, parents' right to make decisions for their children, and the importance of respecting boundaries even within families where power and tradition often complicate relationships. The planets on the ceiling and the rockets on the walls were not just decorations. They were evidence that one little boy's dreams had been protected and honored, even when doing so required standing up to powerful people and having uncomfortable conversations. The royal family moved forward, carrying the lessons of this incident with them. Trust had been tested and relationships had been strained, but ultimately, the well-being of the children had been prioritized above all else. And in Prince Louis's room, surrounded by stars and planets, a young prince slept peacefully, never knowing the battle that had been fought to protect his simple dream of having a room of his own, designed by himself exactly as he had imagined it.